Communism. Hegel says, everything in reality changes because it has not yet attained its true essence. There is no doubt that communism is an explicit call for reform. Indeed, everything about its existence and emergence was an inevitable necessity to confront the exploitation and oppression of the working class by unrestrained capitalism and to establish balance in the global economic system and power structure. In its early days, capitalism promised prosperity and well-being in Western Europe. But it quickly turned into an exploitative system that squeezed the blood of workers to enrich the wealthy, leaving the working class perpetually enslaved. The workers' reaction took the form of protests or strikes, which were met with violence, suppression, and bullets from the owners. One of the most famous confrontations between workers and owners was the bloody events of 1886, where police killed a large number of workers at an American factory during a peaceful strike demanding shorter working hours. These arbitrary actions by the owners were enough to ignite revolution and hatred in the hearts of the working class. It was a natural outcome of the harsh conditions faced by workers that a system would emerge to reclaim their rights and liberate them from the bondage of employers. Thus, Marx's ideas swept through the minds of the working class, becoming a beacon of hope that attracted attention across Europe. Governments opposed the communist movement, and Marx was expelled from some countries. However, communist philosophy eventually spread and found receptive ears worldwide. It was no coincidence that Marx appeared on the stage of history, nor was it merely a passionate love for the workers and their interests that drove him to research, scrutinize, and laboriously explore the past, present, and future of economics and its impact on societies. Rather, it was the inevitability of the circumstances at the time, as if his absence would have left a void and imbalance in social systems. Or, to put it another way, he was driven by the same desire that had pushed Darwin and Freud to challenge humanity. Karl Marx emerged as a revolutionary against the prevailing conditions and systems of his time, determined to change them. He said, "We call communism the real movement that abolishes the current state of things. This real movement differs from all previous movements." Marx began studying the various forms of the capitalist system, particularly the most developed capitalist system of his time, British capitalism. From this, he extracted the underlying foundation that governs the capitalist mode of production, the forms of circulation, and the distribution of material products required by this mode of production. He constructed a model that revealed the inner principle governing this system and controlling the apparent and real characteristics of capitalism. At the same time, while he was interested in extracting the structural framework underlying the capitalist system and tracing the interconnections between its forms, he was equally concerned with the formation and development of the objective factors within this system. Marxist theory states that every system contains within it contradictions that lead to its demise and the emergence of a higher system. The new system then undergoes the same process, giving birth to an even more advanced system, and so on. This evolution is driven by the needs of society, and its previous needs become obstacles hindering its progress. Regarding economic determinism, Marxists assert that the absolute truth is economics. Every action and reaction stems from economics, a form of economic inevitability over which humans have no control. It influences them, but they cannot influence it during its development. This is the law of nature that created humanity, and everything in the universe is an economic reflection. Friedrich Engels, one of the advocates of materialist philosophy, said, "Production and the exchange of products are the foundation upon which every social system is built." Materialist philosophy believes in economic determinism, asserting that humans have no choice or escape from this inevitability. Human feelings follow economic changes and are influenced by them rather than preceding them. The means of production shape society. The proponents of materialist philosophy rejected formal logic, which had previously dominated and denied the existence of contradictions or the unity of opposites. This logic only applies to a static world, whereas the real world is in constant motion. Therefore, only dialectical logic is suitable for explaining its movement. They introduced this philosophical change and ultimately developed the dialectical materialism embraced by Karl Marx, which formed the basis of communist ideology. The communist theory and its philosophy can be summarized as follows. 1. The establishment of a dictatorship termed the dictatorship of the proletariat, meaning the dictatorship of the working class. 2. The abolition of private property and the means of production, transferring them to collective ownership. 3. The elimination of class distinctions and the creation of a classless society. 4. The eventual withering away of the state as a tool of class oppression, leading to a stateless communist society. This is the essence of communist theory and its philosophical foundations. This translation maintains a formal and academic tone, accurately conveying the original text's meaning while adhering to professional standards. The working class is keen on revolution, violence, and instilling class hatred against landowners to strip them of private ownership so that it becomes the property of the people. Capitalism tends to exploit workers to extract the maximum possible profit. This exploitation is an inherent trait of capital. The state takes on the responsibility of welfare and assigns each person roles according to their aptitude and competence. The state determines the jobs and locations where individuals will work. Here, their principles extend beyond economics to encompass human freedom of choice. The idea that the state assumes control over people's affairs, manages their concerns, and assigns them roles regardless of their personal inclinations, under the pretext that the state knows what is best for them, raises a fundamental question. Does this not amount to the premature execution of a person's dreams and emotions? Karl Marx defined human necessities as food, clothing, and sexual satisfaction. He mentioned this in the manifesto and called them the three satisfactions. Providing these needs and ensuring fair economic distribution, he argued, would bring happiness to all, leaving no need for anything beyond these material requirements. They claim that the material reality, economy, and the relations and means of production determine the final structure of society. Communist philosophy also advocates for the dissolution of the family in an individualistic manner, but with an economic twist. They argue that the family did not emerge from a psychological or emotional need between a man and a woman, but rather from an economic interest. Women depended on men for sustenance because men controlled the means of production. As a result, women became the exclusive property of their husbands. Communism views the family as fostering feelings of property ownership to pass on wealth to offspring. Communism spread everywhere, and eventually, Mikhail Gorbachev stood at the heart of communism in the Kremlin, burying the principles, laws, and theories of this ideology after 70 years of implementation. He introduced the concept of perestroika, restructuring, in his book, depicting the intellectual and cultural crisis faced by this closed ideology. Gorbachev also announced glasnost, openness and transparency, and through its implementation, the true situation became evident. The Soviet Union was a military superpower, but an economically and industrially backward state. The truth about the Communist Party, the real source of the problem, was exposed in newspapers and magazines: its rigidity, bureaucratic apparatus, and corruption. Finally, history broke free from the iron cage of historical materialism. They established nurseries and promoted their benefits under the slogan of protecting children from their ignorant parents, fearing for their moral corruption. Communism believes that crime originates from economic factors, arguing that poverty and virtue cannot coexist within a person. Thus, eliminating crime in a capitalist society is impossible since its existence is natural in such a system. Here they disagree with Freud, who argued that crime stems from sexual repression. Communists accuse experimental and psychoanalytical psychologists of encouraging crime by promoting psychological determinism. As for ideals, communists see them as arising from poor economic conditions, mere illusions embraced by those who were economically deprived of fulfilling their ambitions, leading them to seek solace in morality and higher ideals. Communism believes these principles have harmful effects on society. One of the core principles communism has also embraced is secularism, scientific rationalism, a political concept that promotes indifference to religion, its rejection, and its exclusion. This definition is found in European and American references. Secularism emerged from the historical conflict between the church and the state in Europe. Secularists advocated for the separation of the church from governance, restricting its role to religious affairs. Over time, secularism evolved to reach its extreme form in Marxist-Leninist movements, which openly called for the eradication of religion, claiming it to be the opium of the people. Marx, in his book Anti-Düring, described religion as an obsolete myth fabricated by feudalists and capitalists to distract the masses from class struggle. He asserted that religion represents humanity's imaginary truth, suggesting that eliminating it as a source of illusory happiness is a requirement for genuine happiness. These allegations and Marx's hostility toward religion pale in comparison to the even greater animosity expressed by Engels. But Marxist philosophy harbors more than just anti-religious sentiment. It also embodies a mechanical worldview and a metaphysical illusion, claiming to have discovered a dialectical nature in the universe. Marxist historical materialism dismisses physics, chemistry, and biology, reducing everything to a hollow dialectic that fails to grasp history's comprehensive movement. Marxism presents a view of cosmic and biological evolution that transcends empirical observation and reality. According to Marxism, matter is not created, it is eternal and infinite in space and time. The cosmic evolutionary process is unending, self-sufficient, and infinitely developmental. Marxism deifies this ongoing cosmic transformation, portraying it as an eternal process that sustains itself ontologically, just as it deifies empirical reality. Marx stated that geological history depicts Earth's changes as a process of self-formation and continuous creation. He strongly rejected the idea of ontological dependence. Engels, in Dialectics of Nature, argued that matter, through its mechanical transformation, could eventually convert, under suitable conditions, into heat, electricity, chemical activity, or even life. However, he maintained that matter itself could not create these conditions independently, as it might have lost its movement at some point in eternity. Naturally, these claims are entirely unrealistic, lacking scientific evidence, and fail to convince any rational thinker. Given our current understanding of physical and astronomical evolution, we can measure the time span of the known universe, proving that Marxist theory is metaphysical and unscientific. It is nothing more than a philosophy based on arbitrary assertions about matter and dialectics, despite Marx and Engels' strenuous efforts to prove otherwise. Marxist philosophy still influences many, presenting itself as a towering ideology that overcomes all opposing currents. They elevate humanity with grand statements such as, "Man is the active force in this existence." However, they seem oblivious to Marx's own statement in Anti-Düring. Man is a product of nature, made from matter. His thought and emotions are mere reflections of external influences processed by his brain. This is Marxism, reducing the world and humanity to pure materialism. Thus, they strip humans of their freedom of choice, expression, and belief. They also rob them of their grand aspirations and ambitions, reducing them to mere consumers of food, clothing, and sexual gratification, the ultimate goal they envision before advancing toward their larger dream. The goal is for communism to extend worldwide, forming a global government that prevents warfare and militarization, where people will live in peace and harmony. But will they, at that point, introduce new human needs beyond those shared with animals? Will they reconsider their narrow materialistic perspective on life? Or will food, clothing, and sexual gratification remain humanity's ultimate goals? If Karl Marx were to rise from his grave in Highgate, where he has rested for over a century, and see that half the world has lived under communism, he would initially feel joy, believing that his dream had been realized and that global communism was near. However, he would also feel sorrow and disappointment upon witnessing how his theory was implemented. The immense cost to individual freedom and the oppressive methods used under communist regimes in Eastern Europe would certainly have distressed Marx himself. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, led by Lenin in Russia, was not what Marx had envisioned. He had predicted that revolution would erupt in Europe, particularly in England. Lenin did not primarily rely on Marx's legacy, but rather on the traditions of secret societies from past centuries, the terror of the French Revolution, and Napoleon's autocratic control over the state, supported by the military and police. Lenin's true belief was not in the working class, but in technocrats. Scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, officers, secret police, and even small capitalists. British historian Paul Johnson describes Lenin as an exceptional organizer and dominator, but not a revolutionary thinker on par with Marx. Regardless of Lenin's role in implementing communism in Russia, the question remains: did the system achieve its objectives? Has it become the economic model admired even by non-communists? While communists argue that society must be built on a solid economic foundation, have they achieved stability? A U.S. congressional study spanning 1,000 pages answered these questions with a resounding no. The communist system in Eastern Europe faces countless social problems. Analysts believe that meaningful reform is only possible if the government and party abandon bureaucratic red tape that stifles economic initiatives. Ultimately, communism has failed to prove itself as the ideal and final system. Western democratic nations have achieved progress and prosperity without resorting to oppression. Communism, beneath its claims of fairness, harbors resentment and hostility, not just toward its opponents, but toward all humanity.